Today's lesson is titled, Who is My Neighbor? Is that better? Please turn your Bibles to the book of Luke, Luke chapter 10, actually. And before we begin, I wanted to address something since we're being recorded and it's online. Tuck, I know that we are, as preachers, are supposed to listen to our elders. I know we're supposed to put stock in everything they say, especially when it comes to the church, when it comes to theological matters. However, I have chosen to disagree with them and wearing my Halloween costume to preach in for the simple fact that I can't see out of it that well. But anyway, yes, today we are going to be reading, as you probably are aware, of the Good Samaritan. And we're going to be in Luke chapter 10, starting at verse 25. I'm reading from the NIV, so please follow along. My goodness. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus said. "Do this and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked, "And who is my neighbor?" That is the question today. Who is my neighbor? You see, at that time in the first century, it was very complex. Israel had a very complex society. You see, you had the unclean. You had, the ones that had leprosy, the ones with skin diseases, the ones with were sick, that people couldn't be around, contagious. You had sinners, the known sinners, the tax collectors. You had the people that shepherds. You had people that were engaged in work with the Gentiles, and then you had the outcasts. The outcasts were like the Gentile nations, the rest of the foreigners, the Samaritans especially. And then you had the shame. The shame. The ones that had been caught committing sin, as well as the family members of those who had committed sin. And, of course, the victim of the one who the sin had been committed against. They were also in the society of shame. And then there was the law-abiding. Now, your law-abiding, you had those that abided by the law but just did not agree with your view. And then you had those who abided by the law, but they were just too lazy to put it into practice. So, see, society was very complex. This was a very politically driven question. Who is my neighbor? It would cause lots of debate amongst the Pharisees and amongst the scribes and amongst the experts of the law. But if we continue to read, Jesus' reply in verse 30, and Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, where he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, and passed by on the other side." Now, we have to understand, and you must understand the precepts of that time. Priests were God's chosen people that intermediated between God and Israel. So the priests and the Levites had to obey, not only amplify the law themselves, but they had their own special law, the Levitical law. And according to the words that Jesus just said, the Pharisees would pick up on this. There's a key word, and I'm sure you noticed. We read it where it says the man leaving him half dead. You see, what we would say, he already has one foot in the grave. Well, that word "dead" was enough to apply to Leviticus 21 for the priests and the Levites. You see, if you've ever been rock climbing, there are things that we like to call toe holds. A toe hold is just enough for you to grip your toe on, just enough to put your full support on, and just enough to support you enough to get you up to the next holding. Well, it's not necessarily a complete solid foothold, but it's enough to bear your weight and to move forward. It's enough to say, you know what, I can still progress. Well, that word, that key word, half dead. Dead is in that word. And that applies to Leviticus 21, where they're not allowed to touch the dead because it's considered unclean. Now, when I say unclean, we must understand and justify what unclean is. To be unclean is you're in a state of sin, or you have touched something, or you have been involved in something that is sinful, and there's a chance that you can be cleaned, typically through ceremony, typically through other means such as natural recurrence, medicine, and so forth. Well, if the priest or the Levites had touched this man, it would be questionable with the Pharisees. Are they still clean? I mean, he is technically still alive. But what happens if he dies while they're carrying him back to Jerusalem? Or what happens if after they pick him up, and they're traveling, he dies on the way there? Then they'll be unclean. And then they can't proceed with their normal day, because now they're going to have to go out of their way to go through the cleansing ritual, which is days. They're going to have to do all the practices. So for them, that key word there, half dead, was a toehold for them to say, you know what, I'm just going to pass on. And technically, and as any toehold is, it gets you up. It allows you to move on. So they definitely had a reason. But if we continue reading in verse 33, then Jesus throws in the wonderful word, but. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came to where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and to take care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and then I will return, and I will reimburse you for any extra expenses you may have. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus said, go and do likewise. So when we examine the Samaritan is, and this is Jesus' parable, right? The Samaritan is exhibiting what it means to love your neighbor. And it's a command that I believe we also follow as well, correct? I mean, we follow the first greatest command to love the Lord our God with all our heart, mind, soul, and mind, just like the expert of the law said. But don't we also follow the second greatest commandment as well? Who is our neighbor? Well, to get a physical understanding of what this means, in the book of Acts, the 2nd chapter of Acts, starting at verse 44 of the 2nd chapter, it reads, all the believers were together who had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temples. They broke bread in their homes and ate together, and with glad and sincere hearts praised God and enjoyed the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. You see, that's what it looks like when you love your neighbor. I mean, we as Christians should be following this. In fact, our church should be following this, if I'm correct. So let's go back and let's read where it says Samaritan. Let's put in the word Christian. Okay? So as a Christian came, he took action. He bandaged his wounds. He then used his own resources. He poured oil and wine on his wounds. Then he engaged the man by putting him on his donkey. And then he took him to a place of help, an inn, where he took care of him. He took responsibility for him. And then he followed up and said, I will pay off any extra debt that has occurred. Who is my neighbor? So what keeps us from being like this? I mean, what keeps me from doing this every time I see somebody in need? What is it that prevents? Is it sin? Is it a belief? Is it is it a congregational belief, a choice? You see, in the first church, they didn't have any poor. They didn't have any needy. Because if you read in Acts, it says they sold property, and so everyone would have everything in common. Right? There was no need, physical needs, in the church of the first century in Jerusalem. In fact, it were so inspiring, over half of Jerusalem joined them. Who is my neighbor? What is preventing this church? What is preventing me? What is preventing us from becoming that first church? What is keeping us from loving our neighbor? I mean, we as Christians, we know who our neighbor is, right? I mean, it's pretty plain and simple here. Our neighbor is the one that actually takes action. You see, I've always said, and I'll say it again, Christianity is a verb. It's an action. It's not a name. It's not a title. It's an action. If it was a noun, it would be a work suit. It would be a work clothes. It would be overalls for getting dirty in sin. To take action means to actually put works to your love, to put works to your faith. Show me your faith and I'll show you my works. It's taking action. So what's preventing us from doing this at times? When I was a child, I heard this story, and I think it exemplifies it greatly. A traveler, during a hard time in the country, was traveling. He was hungry and needed a place to rest. Came upon a small village. He went from door to door asking for something to eat and then looking for a place to stay. But at every door they told him they didn't have enough to share, enough to spare, because everybody was indeed going through hard times. And so after going through the whole village, this guy went to the middle of the village where the huge kettle was, the village kettle, started a fire, went to the river, got water, poured it into the kettle, and waited until it started boiling. And then he reached into his pocket and pulled something out and dropped it into the water. A little voice behind him says, "What are you doing?" He turned and looked and saw a little girl. "Oh, hello. I'm making stone soup." She says, "Stone soup?" Yes, it's stone soup. It is very delicious. It is wonderful. It'll feed the entire village." At that time, I heard another voice. "I told you to stay away from him." And the mutt girl's mother, mutt girl looks at her and says, "Stone soup. He's making stone soup." The woman says, "Stone soup? No one can make soup from stones." Yes. Oh, it's very delicious and it'll feed everybody," said the little girl. And stone soup, and what exactly goes into stone soup, she asked. The guy says, "I'm glad you asked. It's delicious as it is, but it would be better if we had maybe some carrots." And the woman said, she was intrigued. She said, "Okay, I got a couple carrots I can spare." So she went back and got her carrots. And while she was gone, more people came. More villagers came and said, "What's going on? Stone soup." Guy said, yeah, it's very delicious. And the people saw the woman bring the carrot up, and he asked her, please start chopping it up and put it into the soup. And people was like, what in the world? And he says, you know what would make it taste better if it had cabbage? And one of the other neighbors said, I've got some cabbage I can give. And so they go back to their house, they connect with the head of cabbage, and someone else said, well, what else does it take? And he goes, potatoes. And if also we had onions. I've got some onions back here. And some salt. We got salt, no problem. But you know what really makes stone soup taste really well? A good soup bone. And of all people, the village leader spoke up and said, well, I might have a soup bone I can spare. They said, go get it. So he comes back with the ham hock. They put the ham hock in the soup, and they ask for some herbs, and they spice it all up. And pretty soon, there's a wonderful smell of soup going on throughout the village. And without being told, the villagers start gathering tables, start gathering chairs, they start chatting excitedly. There's enough food for everybody. Everybody's excited. This is going to be a great meal. And so they all, without being told, start getting soup out of the pot and start filling up their bowls. And everyone gets fed. And everyone's happy. And they're rejoicing. And they're having a good old time. And then towards the end, the traveler gets up and says, okay. He walks over to the pot. And he uses the ladle, fishes around. He finds the stone and pulls it out. And he cleans it off, says that, and puts it in his pocket and says, there, that'll make another stone soup another day. You see, the villagers realized, and I hope you do too, what was preventing them from coming together as a village and having soup for everybody was they're unwilling to share. It was because they were unwilling to share, whether it was greed, whether it was personal choice. They were unwilling to share. But if they had all shared, there's enough food for everybody. Everybody's stomach gets full. Everybody is happy. Everybody gets to tell the wonderful story of how we all came together and made stone soup. The church today, if we were to come together as one village, imagine the stone soup we could share with others. Imagine we could feed every soul. We would have joy, peace. We'd be of one mind, of one spirit. There'd be no more hiding personal lives, or hiding personal issues, or just getting past the fact of, I don't like interacting with people. Yeah, but the whole village is starving. Everybody needs to be fed. I don't know about you, but I know about me, I'm guilty of this. I don't want to share. Why? I'm working on that. Are you? In closing, the neighbor is always easy to identify in any Christian's point of view. We've all heard this story several times. We've all heard it throughout our whole Christian life in Bible school and in class. We're all familiar with this phrase of, who is my neighbor? The question is, are we willing to do something about it? Are we willing to put our money where our mouth is and actually practice what we preach? That, my dear friends, is how a village comes together. If you are not sure of your ways, if you are lost, or if you have questions, or if you want to find Jesus and discover this true joy of what it means to become one village, our elders will be in the back. And as we get ready to sing this next song, Please feel free to come to the back. If you have anything to share, they will take you to the back to a private room where you can share with them and address. But please, take some time for yourself so we can all become a village.